The music didn't stop, but the room did. Conversations died mid-sentence. Laughter froze in open mouths. Even the string quartet hesitated for half a second, bows hovering in the air, as if they felt it too. Something was wrong. Something had entered the room that money could not control. At the edge of the ballroom, just beyond the glow of crystal chandeliers and gold-trimmed walls, stood a homeless black boy who was never meant to be seen here. He looked small against the marble pillars. His shoes were split at the seams, toes peeking through like they were ashamed. His jacket hung loose on his shoulders, borrowed, donated, worn by too many bodies before his. His hair was trimmed unevenly, like someone had tried their best with shaking hands. And yet, what made people uncomfortable wasn't his clothes. It was his presence. He didn't bow his head. He didn't beg. He stood there breathing, eyes wide but steady, as if he belonged to the same air as them. Security noticed him immediately. They always did. Two men in black suits moved with practiced speed, hands already reaching for radios, eyes sharp with suspicion. This was a billionaire's charity gala. Invitations were exclusive. Names were checked twice. People like him didn't wander in by accident. People like him weren't supposed to cross the doors at all. Whispers spread like a ripple across still water. Who let him in? Is this some stunt? Does he have a weapon? A woman in diamonds clutched her purse closer. A man with a seven-figure watch frowned, irritated, as if his evening had been stained. Somewhere near the center of the room, a powerful man straightened in his chair. The billionaire. The host. The father. The boy felt the eyes on him. Hundreds of them. Heavy. Sharp. Judgmental. He felt the old fear rise in his chest, the kind he knew well. The fear that said, turn around, disappear, don't make trouble. His hands trembled, just a little. But his feet didn't move back. Because across the room, under a spotlight meant for donors and speeches, sat a girl in a wheelchair. She wore a soft blue dress that matched the ribbons in her hair. Her legs rested still beneath the fabric, unmoving, like they had been her whole life. Her smile was perfect in the way smiles are when they've been practiced for years. The kind you wear when people look at you too long. When they speak slowly, carefully. When they say you're brave for simply existing. She was the billionaire's daughter. The reason this gala had a heart attached to it. The symbol of inspiration everyone loved to applaud. The boy saw none of that. He saw the way her eyes drifted away from conversations. He saw how people spoke over her, around her, but never to her. He saw loneliness dressed in silk. And something inside him tightened, then steadied. Before security could reach him, before his courage could run away, he stepped forward. Gasps followed him as he crossed the floor. Each step echoed louder than the music. People leaned back in their chairs as he passed, as if poverty were contagious. A woman whispered, "This is inappropriate." A man shook his head, embarrassed for him. The billionaire's jaw clenched. This was supposed to be a night of generosity, not disruption. Not this. The boy stopped in front of the girl's wheelchair. He swallowed. His mouth felt dry. His heart beat so hard he thought everyone could hear it. For a second, doubt crept in. He could still turn away. He could still vanish into the night with nothing but this moment burning in his chest. Instead, he lifted his hand. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't confident. It shook, just enough to tell the truth. "May I have this dance?" he asked. His voice was quiet, almost swallowed by the music, but the room heard it anyway. Silence crashed down. Then laughter. Sharp. Unkind. Nervous. Someone snorted. Someone else laughed too loudly, trying to break the tension. A few people looked away, uncomfortable, like they didn't want to witness whatever humiliation was about to happen next. The billionaire stood halfway out of his chair. Anger flashed across his face, mixed with something else. Fear. Not fear for his daughter, but fear of the scene being made. Of control slipping. Of appearances cracking. He opened his mouth to speak, to shut it down, to remind everyone who was in charge here. The girl looked up at the boy. For the first time that night, her smile disappeared. Not replaced by fear. Not by confusion. By curiosity. Real curiosity. Her eyes moved over his face, his worn clothes, his hopeful expression. She didn't see a problem. She didn't see a threat. She saw someone asking her something no one ever asked. The boy didn't rush her. He didn't pity her. He didn't look at the wheelchair. He looked at her eyes and waited. Time stretched thin. The music kept playing, softer now, like it was afraid to interrupt. Security paused, unsure. The billionaire's breath caught. This wasn't how the night was supposed to go. Then, slowly, deliberately, the girl lifted her hand and placed it in his. The contact was light, simple, but it landed like thunder. A murmur swept through the room. Laughter died. Someone covered their mouth in shock. The billionaire froze, unable to move. The boy felt warmth spread through his chest, relief and awe mixing together until his eyes burned. For 1 second, the world narrowed to just that touch. Just that permission. He smiled. Not wide. Not proud. Just real. And in that moment, something cracked open in the room. Something old. Something hidden beneath money and manners and polished floors. A truth no one wanted to face. That dignity doesn't belong to the rich. That humanity doesn't require an invitation. The boy hadn't danced yet. The music hadn't changed. But the night already had. And somewhere deep inside that glittering ballroom, before anyone could stop what was coming next, before power could reassert itself, before security could drag him away, a question hung in the air, heavy and unresolved. What happens when someone the world taught you to ignore reminds you that you are human too? The hand came down hard on his shoulder. Not violent, but firm enough to remind him where power lived. The boy felt it before he heard the voice, rough and low in his ear, full of warning. You don't belong here. The words were sharp, practiced, said 1,000 times to 1,000 people who looked like him. The music kept playing, but it sounded far away now, like it was underwater. The boy didn't pull back. He didn't flinch. He stood still, his hand still warm from hers, his chest rising and falling as he tried to breathe through the sudden weight pressing down on him. The crowd leaned in. Not to help. To watch. Faces lit with curiosity, discomfort, and something darker. Entertainment. This was better than any speech. A real moment. A real mess. Phones stayed tucked away, but eyes were wide. Some people whispered behind raised hands. Others stared openly, like this was proof of something they had always believed. That dignity, when worn by the wrong person, looks like disrespect. The billionaire rose slowly from his chair. His movements were controlled, but his face betrayed him. His jaw was tight. His eyes hard. This wasn't concern. This was embarrassment. This night had been planned down to the second. The donors. The lighting. The stories meant to inspire generosity without discomfort. And now a homeless black boy had stepped into the center of it all and reminded everyone that charity was never meant to look like this. Remove him, the billionaire said. His voice was calm, flat, final. Like he was ordering a course correction, not a human being dragged away. The girl's hand was pulled back to her lap as the guard tightened his grip. Her fingers curled in on themselves, slow and confused, like they didn't understand why the warmth had disappeared. Her smile faded, not dramatically, but quietly, the way hope does when it realizes it doesn't have permission to stay. She looked from the guard to her father, searching for something familiar. Protection. Explanation. Love. What she saw instead was distance. The boy turned his head toward her. He didn't fight. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't beg. He simply met her eyes one last time and spoke softly, like the words were just for her. I just wanted you to feel included. That was it. No apology. No anger. Just truth. The sentence landed heavier than any shout ever could. It cut through the room, slicing past silk dresses and expensive cologne, settling somewhere deep in the chest of everyone who heard it. For a moment, no one breathed. Then the whispers came faster. Sharper. Who let him in? This is inappropriate. He's just looking for attention. Attention. Like kindness was a trick. Like humanity was a scam. The guards began to move him across the floor. His shoes squeaked softly against marble so polished it reflected chandeliers. Each step felt louder than the last. People shifted to make space, careful not to touch him. A woman recoiled as his sleeve brushed her arm, disgust flashing across her face. A man shook his head, muttering about security. No one met his eyes. No one said stop. The doors loomed ahead, tall and heavy, carved with designs older than his entire bloodline's access to rooms like this. When they opened, cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and city streets. The boy was pushed forward, and the warmth of the ballroom vanished in an instant. Rain soaked his jacket immediately, darkening the fabric, clinging to his skin. The doors slammed shut behind him with a sound that echoed longer than it should have. Inside, applause started. Weak at first. Then stronger. A signal that order had been restored. The music swelled again. Glasses clinked. Laughter returned, forced but loud, like everyone was trying to convince themselves the moment was over. But something had shifted. Something invisible had cracked. The girl stared at the empty space where the boy had stood. The dance floor looked different now. Too wide. Too bright. Too quiet. Her chest felt tight, like she was holding something heavy and didn't know how to put it down. She had spent her whole life being looked at. Doctors looked at her charts. Strangers looked at her chair. Donors looked at her as proof their money mattered. People spoke for her, around her, above her. Pity everywhere. Respect nowhere. And then, for one brief moment, someone had asked her. Not her father. Not a nurse. Not a planner or a sponsor. A boy with nothing had looked at her and seen a girl who could say yes or no. A girl with a choice. That feeling didn't leave when he did. It stayed, burning softly, painfully. She turned her head toward her father. Her voice shook when she spoke, not from fear, but from something breaking open inside her. Why did you send him away? The question was simple. Honest. Dangerous. The billionaire stiffened. He hadn't expected that. He had expected gratitude. Compliance. Silence. He leaned down slightly, lowering his voice like the problem was volume, not truth. He spoke about optics. About safety. About reputation. He said the word inappropriate again, like it explained everything. But as the words left his mouth, they sounded thin. Hollow. Even to him. She watched his lips move and felt something settle in her stomach. Disappointment. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just real. She turned back to the floor, blinking fast, refusing to let tears fall in front of people who already decided what her emotions were worth. Across the city, under a flickering bus shelter light, the boy sat on a cold bench, rain dripping off the edge of the roof in steady beats. His jacket was soaked through now. His hands were red from the cold. Cars passed without slowing, spraying water onto the sidewalk. He stared at the wet ground, replaying the moment again and again. The walk. The question. The feel of her hand in his. He didn't regret it. Not when the guard grabbed him. Not when the doors closed. Not now. He felt the loss, sure. The sting of being reminded, again, that kindness has rules when you're poor. That dignity can get you punished. But deeper than that was something steadier. Pride. Quiet and stubborn. Because for 1 second, she hadn't been invisible. And neither had he. The rain kept falling. Inside the ballroom, the music played on. And somewhere between those two worlds, a question lingered, unanswered and heavy, waiting to change everything that came next. The miracle didn't come with applause. It didn't arrive wrapped in speeches or standing ovations. It came quietly, almost stubbornly, the kind of truth that refuses to be ignored once it's spoken. Back in the ballroom, after the doors had closed and the rain had swallowed the boy whole, dessert was served on fine plates with gold edges. The girl didn't touch hers. People noticed, but no one asked why. They rarely did. Conversation flowed around her like she was furniture. She stared at the dance floor, still empty, still glowing, still holding the echo of something that had almost happened. Her father leaned in, smiling for appearances, whispering something about how proud he was of her. She didn't respond. He tried again, softer this time. She turned her head slowly and looked at him, really looked at him, like she was seeing him for the first time. Her voice was calm when she spoke, but it carried across the table in a way that stopped forks mid-air. He's the only one who ever asked me to dance." The room went silent. Not polite silence. Heavy silence. The kind that presses against your ears. People shifted in their seats. Someone cleared their throat. The billionaire felt the words hit him harder than any protest ever could. Something cracked inside his chest. Not loudly. Not cleanly. It was the sound of a belief breaking. The belief that he had protected his daughter. That money had made her safe. That control was love. He didn't answer her. He couldn't. The rest of the night blurred past him. Smiles felt stiff. Applause felt fake. When the gala finally ended and the lights dimmed, he went home to a house so large it echoed even when he was alone. He lay awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing her words over and over again. The only one. He thought of all the people who had looked at his daughter and never seen her. All the rooms she had entered where choices were made for her. And he thought of the boy he had ordered removed like an inconvenience. Near midnight, he sat up and made a call. His voice was low, urgent. "Find him," he told his staff. No speeches. No explanations. Just that. Find him. They searched shelters and soup kitchens, places the billionaire had funded without ever visiting. Hours later, they found him in a community shelter on the other side of the city. The building was old, paint chipped, heat uneven. Inside, laughter bounced off the walls. Music played from a phone speaker with a cracked screen, the sound tinny but alive. The boy stood in the center of a small circle of children, showing them how to move their feet without moving from their spots because there wasn't enough space. He tapped rhythms on the floor. Clapped his hands. The kids followed him, laughing when they messed up, trying again. The billionaire stood in the doorway, unseen, unannounced. He watched. The boy's face was different here. Lighter. Open. He smiled without checking who was watching. He encouraged the smallest kid in the room, nodding like their effort mattered. At one point, a child asked where he learned to dance. The boy paused, then answered honestly. "With my mom," he said. The word caught in his throat, but he kept going. He explained how they used to dance in tiny kitchens and crowded rooms, how dancing made hunger quieter, how it made bad days feel shorter. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't ask for sympathy. He just told the truth. The billionaire felt his throat tighten. This wasn't a hustler. This wasn't a kid looking for attention. This was a giver. Someone who carried joy even when life had taken almost everything else. The laughter in that room didn't come from money or power. It came from being seen. The next morning, the billionaire made a decision that surprised even himself. He didn't call the press. He didn't alert donors. He didn't plan a narrative. He took his daughter and drove to the shelter in a plane car. No security detail. No cameras. Just them. When they walked inside, the boy froze. The music stopped. The kids went quiet. For a split second, fear crossed his face. He stepped back, hands raised slightly, ready to apologize for existing. "I'm sorry if I caused trouble," he said quickly, the words practiced by a lifetime of being blamed. "I didn't mean to." The girl shook her head. Her eyes were steady. "Will you dance with me?" she asked. The room held its breath. The boy blinked, unsure he heard right. He glanced at her father, who stood still, silent, letting the moment belong to them. Slowly, the boy nodded. Music started again from the cracked phone speaker. Softer this time. He placed her hands in his, gentle, careful, not leading, not pulling. He waited. She lifted her arms the way she could. He followed her rhythm. Let her set the pace. They moved together in small motions, imperfect and beautiful. Something filled the room that had nothing to do with charity. Joy. Not the kind that performs. The kind that settles deep and warm. The kids watched, wide-eyed. The billionaire felt tears blur his vision, and for once, he didn't wipe them away. He understood it then. Power disappears when respect enters the room. In that space, there was no billionaire. No homeless boy. No wheelchair. Just two souls meeting in the middle. But as the music faded and the moment lingered, the billionaire knew this was only the beginning. A truth had been revealed. And truths like this don't let you go back to the way things were. The room smelled faintly of rain and polished wood. Outside, the city hummed with the indifferent pulse of cars and streetlights, but inside the shelter, the world had narrowed to a single, sacred circle. The billionaire stood in the doorway, hands clenched in silent remorse, watching his daughter. She laughed. Truly laughed. Not the careful, camera-ready smile she had worn at gala after gala. Not the polite, controlled mirth he had paid therapists and specialists to coax from her. This laugh came from somewhere deep inside, a place he had never touched, a place money could not reach. It rose in a pure, shaking wave, echoing off cracked walls and scuffed floors, and something in him cracked too. The pride. The fear. The carefully constructed barriers of wealth that he thought could shield him from every human failure. All of it fell away. Tears slid down his cheeks, unheeded, unshaped by mirrors or cameras, uncontained by decorum. He wanted to step forward, to apologize for all the walls he had built around her, around himself, but he stayed in the shadows, learning something he had never known. Humility is silent, but it speaks louder than any announcement or headline. The boy moved carefully, guiding her small hands in his, letting her dictate the rhythm, teaching her again what freedom felt like. He was gentle, patient, and alive in a way that startled the father. Each tap of his feet, each cautious twirl, seemed to erase decades of rules, of control, of fear. The billionaire's mind raced with possibilities, but not for himself. For the first time, he thought about the world outside that wealth could not touch. About the thousands of children and young people who moved unseen, unnoticed, dismissed as invisible because society had not cared to see. And then the boy paused, breath-catching as he looked up at the billionaire's daughter, smiling with that honesty that could not be bought or taught. She whispered something he could barely hear, but it pierced through every wall in the room. "Thank you for seeing me." The billionaire swallowed, his throat tight. He wanted to offer her everything: schools, therapists, doctors, trainers. But he realized that the boy had already given her something more important: respect, recognition, choice. She was not a charity case. She was not a project. She was a person who had been seen. And the boy, so small, so fragile, yet unshakable in spirit, had reminded him of what true courage looked like. Later that evening, in the quiet of the empty shelter, he asked the boy to sit. The boy's eyes, wary but kind, met his. He offered a home, education, the keys to opportunities that had never been imagined for him. But the boy did not accept without condition. "Don't save me," he said, voice steady, almost commanding. "Stand with me." The billionaire nodded, swallowing the shame of every year he had spent believing money was enough. That moment redefined him more than any boardroom victory ever had. The shelter began to change that night. Not through walls of marble or press releases, but in subtle, quiet shifts. Dance mats were laid down. Music filtered through the speakers. Children who had been silent for years began to tap, to sway, to laugh. The billionaire's daughter learned not to be fixed but to be expressed. Therapy came not through lectures or exercises, but through movement. Every small step was a lesson in humanity. Every laugh a ripple in a world that had often chosen to ignore them. The boy became her partner, not her subordinate. A friend, not a subject of pity. Together they moved, teaching each other the rhythm of dignity and freedom. Outside, the world remained the same. Streets still hummed with indifference. Money and power still dominated headlines. But inside that small circle, something irreversibly changed. People began to look again. Really look. The billionaire found himself asking questions he had never asked before. Who do we overlook? Whose hands remain empty when we offer abundance? Where does true influence lie? And, most terrifyingly, he realized that influence was not measured in wealth, donations, or status. It was measured in humanity. In the courage to recognize it in others, especially those society had long since told him to ignore. There was a moment, weeks later, when the billionaire watched them dance alone in the shelter. The girl's wheelchair was no longer a symbol of limitation but of strength and rhythm. The boy moved around her effortlessly, lifting her hands, twirling gently, laughing as if the world itself had been reduced to this tiny sanctuary. Their laughter intertwined. Not pity. Not charity. Equality. Connection. The father's eyes brimmed with tears again, and this time, he did not hide them. He understood that money could buy comfort, influence, even fear, but never this. Never the intimacy of two souls meeting on the same ground. Never the lesson that dignity cannot be purchased, only honored. In that same room, decisions were made that would ripple outward. The Gala Foundation shifted its mission, away from mere donations and accolades, toward restoring dignity in communities that had been ignored. Children who had been taught invisibility were invited to be seen. Adults who had long since stopped hoping for recognition found it again. And in the quietest corners, the boy and girl continued to dance, teaching the most powerful man in the room the simplest truth he had never learned: miracles are not currency. They are not possessions. They cannot be commanded, controlled, or measured. They arrive in moments of mutual recognition, in gestures of bravery, in the courage to ask, even when the world expects silence. The final image lingered in the billionaire's mind, replaying like a film he could not stop. The boy and the girl, moving together, imperfectly, beautifully. No cameras. No applause. No accolades. Just two lives intersecting, unguarded and free. It was a miracle the world might not notice, but it was the most important kind of all. It was proof that real value does not lie in status, nor in titles, nor in what society deems worthy. It lies in seeing someone, really seeing them. And in that act alone, everything changes. When the billionaire finally left the shelter that night, he walked into the world carrying more than wealth or influence. He carried understanding, humility, respect. He had witnessed what money could never buy, and he would never forget it. The boy had asked him nothing, demanded nothing. Yet he had taught the billionaire a lesson no ledger could reflect. The girl had laughed without a filter, without expectation, showing the purest reflection of her humanity. And together they had reminded all of them, that dignity, respect, and love are earned not through privilege, but through recognition, courage, and the willingness to see someone as fully human. And sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do is simple: ask someone to dance. Even when the world expects you to stay invisible. Even when society says you don't belong. Even when you have nothing to give but yourself. That is where miracles live. That is where humanity survives. That is where change begins.